Hello, everybody. Adam Parks here with another episode of Receivables Podcast. Today, I'm here with two gentlemen that you probably already know. I've got Mr. Chris Runcie and Mr. Chris Murphy joining us with DebtLink. How you guys doing today?
Good, Adam. Thanks for having us.
I really do appreciate you guys coming on and spending some time with me today. I appreciate your insights. Today, we're going to talk about building digital trust and what does it mean to build trust in the debt collection marketplace, especially online in a B2B environment, in a B2C environment. It's just such a unique thing. We live in such a unique world that I think it's important that we address some of those methodologies, some of the places where we can start to build some of that digital trust and what that looks like in our unique world. But before we jump into that, starting with you, Mr. Runcie, could you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Sure. Thanks, Adam. So I started in this business 30 years ago on the brokerage side. I worked for a firm that brokered mortgage servicing rights. It morphed into performing loans and charged off debt. I worked for a few other companies before starting my own brokerage firm 22 years ago now, and have been very fortunate over the years to meet a lot of great people, including Mr. Murphy. And we came together a couple of years ago to start on DebtLink.
Excellent. Mr. Murphy, how about your background?
I'm older than Runcie, so I started out mainly in the agency side of the world, receivables venture, mainly on the agency and sales side. And so for most of my career, I worked for a number of the large players in the space, head of sales, running sales, and I ran into Mr. Runcie 20 plus years ago when I was tasked with launching a debt buying division within the firm I worked for at the time. And I hired Chris as a consultant to help me do that. And clearly he didn't screw it up. No, I'm kidding. He did a great job. And so when I left there, my next place asked us to do the same thing. And I partnered with Chris again. So we've had a long-standing relationship, but the majority of my life has been on the sales side of the agency side of the world. So that's been my background.
So you guys are coming with a debt buyer and a debt collection experience in your background, which I think really plays well into today's discussion. But now you've also got the DebtLink organization now. And let's talk about that. What do you do at DebtLink and what's the value proposition to the industry?
Well, jump in quick. So DebtLink came from Chris, really, his idea, but I had an experience on the agency side. I worked for a firm that started with the letter A. And I used to get requests for information all the time, not because they knew anything about me, but I was an A. So I was high on that alpha list. And after asking them a little bit about what they did and did what we all do as a qualifying, I would find 9 out of 10 times they were not fit for us. And so instead of just hanging up, I'd say, well, here, tell me more about what you do. And then I'd start to explain to them where to find a resource. And it wasn't easy. So that was my experience. And Chris had something different, but that's what led us together. Chris, talk about coming out of COVID. Nope, we lost him. Well, he'll come back in. But Chris's experience coming out of COVID, he was looking for agencies to help with his clients and found that the only thing that was out there was an alphabetized list and thought there has to be a better way. So he teamed up with his son who was out, because of COVID was home, and they built the preliminary framework for DebtLink. Reached out to me and we partnered to come along. When he explained what it was, I thought a great fit. And our initial mission was, how do we create a directory that would allow people to find resources, and especially if you're looking for an agency, an attorney, a debt buyer or seller, and actually filter it to one that best fits what you need. So the bad debt you're dealing with, is it auto loans and you're looking for a collection agency that can collect that? Or are you a commercial firm that need to collect commercial debt? Finding an agency, and it really kind of goes along with what we're talking about here in terms of digital trust. But how do you connect the right strategic service partner to the firm? And the firm would be the service, the provider of goods or services that has clients. How do you connect the right strategic service partner to them? And that was the original where DebtLink came from.
I think you guys are on point when it comes to building that digital trust, because the first thing about building trust is talking to the right people and not wasting a whole bunch of time having these conversations that are not going to add value. So being able to filter down and identify who's working auto paper, who's working unsecured consumer loans, who's working credit card, and being able to find the right organizations that actually fit the needs and experience of your business. And I think that connection is one of the ways in which digital trust is ultimately built. Like that's a major factor of being able to get to the right people.
You already know that. You're talking to a company, and a red flag that pops up when you ask them, what are they good at? If they're good at everything, that's a little scary. But if I'm looking, what we also know in our experience, my experience in the agency world, firms that have experience collecting in a certain space or a specific, we would call it specialty or niche, they have an experience for a reason and they're good at it. And so if you can align yourself with somebody that has that experience, generally speaking, your results are going to be better.
Agreed. And I think finding those people has always been difficult because there is no real place to do that. So you can go to all these conferences, and unless you're out there actually talking to the people and writing that information down, it's really hard to figure out who's the best at auto loans between 3,000 and 7,000 average balance.
And it's interesting as you talk about building virtual trust. Things have changed. Again, I laugh about how long I've been in this space. You're still a rookie, relatively speaking.
Fair.
I mean, back in the day, as you called on firms, I did was send emails, send paper letters, make phone calls, do whatever you had to do to get somebody to answer the phone. When I first started, it was really caller ID really wasn't a big thing then, but you realized there was a gatekeeper. So how do you get past that? And then how'd you get 30 seconds to get somebody to agree to see you? And then at that point, if they would agree, you'd book that appointment, and now I'd hang up because that appointment's booked for next week. And the next hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, I'd look for every other prospect I had in that general market, cluster book, and then jump on a plane and fly. That's what we used to do. Well, part of that's still the same today. Companies are trying to connect with somebody to give them 30 seconds to explain a little bit about what they do to see if that prospect's willing to give them engagement time to demonstrate. The demonstrations now, for the most part, are virtual. But one thing that has changed dramatically, nobody buys anything today without reading a review and doing their digital research. Or knowing that they're going to get questioned about, did they do that? And that's huge. So, I was on a call before this podcast where that was exactly what the client was talking to me about, is that they're frustrated that people are doing, and they are doing that digital recon. And so how do they put that best foot forward to really establish the trust in that space? That was big. So I think that's a challenge that a lot of companies are dealing with. We're trying to figure out ways to help support and allow them to put that best foot forward.
The first thing you do when you hear a new company name is go to Google. You type in that company name, and what are you going to see? And depending on your knowledge of the debt collection industry, you may not be comfortable with all the negativity that you see when you're trying to hire a collection agency. And it doesn't have to be all negative, but it often is driven from negativity. When you go and you search for a collection agency name on Google, quite often or a debt buyer, you're quite often going to find this negativity. Consumer attorneys suggesting that you sue this debt collector rather than pay them, which I think is ambulance chasing, but that's another story.
Yeah.
But how do you then...
We digress, right?
Yeah, and so I digress. But how do you then start to weed through who the good organizations are? Because the reality is some of the best organizations in the space, and having written policy and procedure, having audited hundreds of firms across the space, I know that some of the best well-run firms in the space have had terrible online reputations. So how do you then start to separate from this consumer B2C negativity? Because nobody loves a debt collector, and it's only over the last couple of years that we've actually been able to actively engage with the consumers through online means to start generating positive reviews. And you can look at Aspire Recovery, you can look at Indebted, and a number of other companies, Central Portfolio Control, that have thousands of 5-star reviews. But they actively put the time, energy, and effort into doing that. It's expensive, it's time consuming, like there's a process to that. So how do we then start to separate this B2C negativity from the B2B realities of working with a debt collection company?
Yeah, it's interesting that, and it really is important when you're talking about digital trust, how to separate the B2B versus B2C. And so there are those firms that they're looking for positive response from in the B2B context in how they treated the debtor. And they're trying to get positive there because they are trying to influence the other debtors that they're connecting with to positively respond to them. So there's a means to an end there. But from a B2B sales perspective, Google reviews is not a safe place in the receivables industry. It's just not. And so you deal with a challenge of how do I satisfy the need for this shopper to get the warm and fuzzies without risking alienating them on unfair B2C in the mix. And that's really, we call it the Yelp effect, because quite frankly, it really sort of developed through the use of Yelp. I've used this example before. You're going to go shop for a restaurant. You go to their website because you want to read their menu a little bit, and they have a review on their website, but we all know nobody puts a bad review on their own website. So you'll read through, and if it looks good, you're eventually going to migrate to Yelp to read what those reviews are. And why? Well, that's a third-party site, and those are given much greater weight. And so that was really, we started to think about it. And so when we built DebtLink, again, the first thing was it was going to be a fancy yellow pages for collection agency, collection attorney, and debt buyers or sellers that could be filtered. And that's great. But before we went live, some of the old timers that came into the industry when I did, and we were showing them what we were doing, they said, well, wait a minute. What about skip tracing? What about payment processing? What about all the other types of services that all operate in our space? And so it grew, and all those are now encompassed. So it's comprehensive. But the real we were like, okay, so now we have everybody that plays here. What's the next step? Well, we went from being a fancy yellow pages to a 24-hour 365 trade show where people can wander down the digital aisle, research these different firms. They can go to one place to find what you would find at RMAI or ACA or CRS. Many of the same, not all, but many of the same players, most of the same players. But you can now have the time, eliminate the awkward avoidance of eye contact, and just look and do that bit of a research. And then when you find a firm that, wow, these guys, I didn't know what they did. This is exactly what I'm looking for. You can research it. You can look a little bit more. Then what we added was the ability to read third-party reviews. And those are reviews that are put on from outside other businesses that have used that service. That's been a game changer. And I would love to say I'm smart enough and brilliant enough to have come up with the concept, but it really came from one of our subscribers that came to us and said, this is how we're using it, and it's been incredibly effective. And of course, from there, we glommed onto that and now have shared it with all of our other subscribers. So it's been really great to be able to see companies drive people to the site to read the reviews that they've been able to acquire from their existing customer base. It's been really, really effective. I mean, what we're looking at in the world of sales today, and that's what I think sales companies that are selling their product or service have to understand. You have a great idea. Well, I talked with a client today that does automated notary. It's a huge problem in the world of debt buying in the broker world, and from creditors selling their portfolios to that notary subject is a very costly, time consuming. They have this great product that most people wouldn't know about. Even if they had a booth at a trade show, how many people are walking down that trade show aisle really not wanting to make eye contact? Or maybe that's not even the decision maker. Most likely it's not.
Sure.
They're the recon person for that firm. Now they can find out more about them in this space. So what we talk about when we talk to companies are, what's your digital footprint look like? What's the message are you sending? Does it, and again, I'm an old school agency guy. Most of this industry was very resistant to change. I'll say it nicely.
It's an understatement of the century, but sure.
The grandfather started it and the father ran it. Now he's turning it over to the next one, and they've done the same thing for the same way for this long time. And you can often tell. And so I think companies are getting much smarter at understanding how to create what they look like from a digital perspective. And then our goal is really, what can we do to influence shoppers to go to a platform and shop for everything they might need in the back office world, whether it's things that I've already referenced. Our first stop was collection agencies, collection attorneys. How do they differ? And why would somebody look at one versus the other? Debt buyers. So we're not, and then we go into skip tracing and payment processing and BPO firms and specialty lenders and insurance and compliance. Again, it's all there. And most of the people that visit our site don't look at one thing. They look at average. I laugh. When we started this 2022, coming out of COVID. Chris and I built it, and I remember us celebrating when we had 100 people visit the site in a month. I was like, it was big time, because, who goes to a website when you first build the website, right?
Yeah, understood.
And so now 3.5 years later, and at that time, again, the first 6 months of our existence, I'm calling all the people that I knew within the industry. I came into the industry with. Many of them are senior guys in their respective companies. And I basically, I begged, and I just said, dude, you got to come on. And most of them laughed. Okay, I'll do it. Well, now let's fast forward 3.5 years later. This month, I was checking my Google Analytics today because I was on another call. I've had over 1,600 visitors to the site in the last 30 days. So 1,600 individual people have come to DebtLink and shopped around. And during that period of time, they've looked at 3.27 pages, or a little over 3 pages per. So they're not just coming in to look at one thing, they're looking around. There's most people when and you know this, you're a marketing guy, or former marketing guy, I don't know.
But I still do marketing.
Most people when they go to a website stay on there for usually 20, 30 seconds at the most. We're averaging close to 2 minutes. So our length of engagement is pretty long. So that's exciting to us to see how that has changed. So now we're at a point where more and more people exponentially are going to DebtLink to connect, to read reviews, to do that research. They're in a place where you can read content that's produced by that client. So it's sort of a combination between LinkedIn and a website, just a little bit easier to manipulate when you need to. That then has added layer on top of that is the ability to have third-party reviews. And that's been a big thing. So from our view in the world of digital and how to augment what you do, we think that we've tried to solve a big piece of that problem. And we continue to add things every month, whether it be webinar, ability to have people really talk about how partners can interact together to better serve the firm, and then going back to the original description. So anyway, I ramble. You can tell I get
No, it's good. I feel like I feel like the businesses that you're doing business with, right? Like those that are using a collection agency are more likely to leave a review on a site like yours than they would be on Google or something else where they feel like they're swimming against the tide. Because if somebody's got 500 negative reviews, you want to be the only positive one on there, right? Like nobody wants to swim against the tide like that, and providing a new place that you can actually leave an honest review, and it doesn't always have to be 5 stars. And I'd be interested in seeing the bell curve of, review levels, right? Like how many stars are they ultimately saying each organization is worth? But I find that to be interesting. And I think that there's providing a place for people to have that conversation is half the battle. Because there isn't a place now that they can go and have this kind of honest conversation, because you can't do it at a trade association or something like that, because that's anti-competitive. It's not really something you do on a news site like ours. I think this is a great location for people to be able to have those types of discussions and to capture that type of information and include it, because it is a mission critical function when it comes to what is a debt collector, why are debt collection agencies exist, all of those things. I think that we are a necessary part of the credit ecosystem. And where can we have a true and honest discussion? Because the general public does not view us as the group of people keeping interest rates low, or the group of people that's helping to maintain the availability of credit. And especially now, as credit is starting to tighten, underwriting standards are rising, especially in fintech. They would give a loan to anybody with a pulse 3 years ago. But today, it's a very different animal. So facilitating or creating a place to facilitate those discussions is mission critical as an industry, that we need an open forum to have these types of talks.
So for a guy that's been around as long as I have, one thing hasn't changed. All the time I was running sales organizations, we would do everything. We did trade shows, we did mailers, we had a sales team, we did everything you can imagine. And still on a daily basis, we ran into somebody we were trying to sell who would say, "Oh my gosh, I never knew about you." We'd only been around for 50 years, but that shouldn't matter. So that still happened. And it was maddening. So what else could we do? So that was a challenge to me. As I look at what we do And again, somebody and I know the guy, some of the men and women that have been in the industry 30, 40 years has seen this before where credit granting was loose and went crazy. And then we hit a tough patch and the economy slowed down and all the people that got credit that shouldn't have had it, had problems, or the people that got overextended, and we go through these waves. So as I'm sitting, and I remember when it hit the first time, it was new to me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, look what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting here watching it again going, I've seen this before. And so we know there is a wave. And what we also know is that there are all these collection managers and controllers and CFOs that are maybe in their 30s and 40s. And when it happened in the first, they haven't seen some of what they're about to see before.
Yeah.
And so right now, what we know is that they're going to need to start searching for solutions, because what's going to happen, all these businesses happens it's a cyclical thing. All of a sudden each of their aging buckets starts to grow, and they're 120 plus, or when it starts to get crazy, and then the CFO will come in and say, why is this 120 so big? And so the collection manager takes all the resources off where they should be and puts them where they shouldn't be to try to drive down an older bucket.
Mm-hmm.
And the pressure is going to mount. How do I find a problem? How do I find a problem solver? How do I solve this problem? And so we're really trying to build something that we can market outside our industry bubble to all of those people, so they know where to go to find them. And in the same respect, again, a guy that's been around as long as I have, I still every week meet with another firm who we're onboarding onto DebtLink, that I'm learning about what they did or what they do. In the last week, we've onboarded a high-level AI firm and this notary automations firm. And it was incredibly interesting to me as I'm going through and asking them what they do, how they do it. And this the AI firm, Cedric, is going through their demo, showing me what they can do.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought back from
I'm familiar with the product.
Buying, I shouldn't have sold any of that stuff. I'd be killing it right now. So their tools and technology is just amazing. So things like that excite me. And I'm glad that companies can go to a place, do that research on a third-party site, and really get a feel where they're not being overly sold. I can just the facts, ma'am, and then go and choose to engage from there. And that's, to me, really exciting. And so as we talk about trust, how do we do what we do? We're looking at how can a shopper who we know is going to do digital research do it in a centralized place?
Mm-hmm.
Check all the boxes on product, service, video, review, do the whole, see everything. And also maybe have cross connections and see that this firm is working with these guys, and both can help me do a better job when they work together. So there's a lot of stuff going on that we think we can facilitate. So it's an exciting thing.
I think we're going to see more creditors that are scrambling to find solutions in the not too distant future. We're looking at an increase in the volume of accounts that are falling into the space. If you look at the 2024 TransUnion Debt Collection Industry Report, we identify like 90% of debt collection companies are expecting an increase this year in the volume of accounts that they're seeing, and originations are at an all-time high, especially in bank card. So we're looking at, not so much in unsecured consumer loans, because I feel like the credit availability is being squeezed. But the charge-off volumes are going through the roof. I recently ran a linear regression analysis from 2021 through 2024, trying to predict out to 2030. Even with a 20% margin of error, we're talking about massive increases in the volume of accounts, which means that networks are going to have to expand. They're going to have to expand.
Yeah, we see other things
and you
that
can't hire
happen
more people right now. So now what?
Yeah, the volumes will increase. And another thing that will impact the market that's really cool. When I say cool, I don't mean in a good, I mean, it's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, an interesting dynamic.
But, how the population age groups, their perspective on things change. We found for a long time where 18 to 25-year-old, they didn't care about credit reporting. They didn't care. They didn't think it bothered them. Then they hit over 25, 27. They started to become first-time home buyers and realized credit score does have a financial impact. And now we got to figure out how to fix that. So there's, these types of things are going to happen. We've seen it before, is that these cyclical adjustments to different generations will begin to impact what we do. Again, having having a place that can service that. But as I think about, again, stuff that I have seen and as we watch, understanding how cyclical our year is in the receivables management space, and understanding number of collection days per month and each month. And why is October always so good? Well, it's because July. What happened in July? 4th of July. First week of the month, everybody's invoicing gets off. And so it throws off. And we already know when the cyclical invoice gets out of whack, delinquencies go up. Mm-hmm. Well, they go up September, 30 days. The next month they get rolled over, go to collections in October. Most of them are not bad debtors, so they get touched once and they pay. So again, understanding the cyclical nature of our industry, understanding how the generational changes happen, I think are important for any service provider to understand, and then have a place where this stuff can be found. I'm getting into a rabbit hole and things like that. But
no, it's a really interesting conversation, Chris. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights with me today, because I think building digital trust is something that you have been very focused on for the last couple of years. And as someone who understands the industry and the ins and outs of being a debt collector and what that relationship between the collections operation and the creditor operations really looks like in a realistic way, is important. It's a mission critical item right now as we're trying to manage ourselves as an industry and looking for opportunities to move faster, to identify the right people that we should be talking to make sure that we're optimizing the value of the accounts at hand. Because that's the challenge right now, is the volume of accounts increases, the liquidation of those accounts generally decreases, which means that we have to find ways to do more with less, whether that's through artificial intelligence vendors, whether that's through, recruiting or BPO services or whatever the case may be. There's a couple of different areas where growth is still sustained in 2025. And it sounds like you're providing a marketplace for people to actually identify those types of organizations from a shopping perspective and actually be able to go out there. I hate to underplay it and call it e-commerce, but it's the same kind of an idea. You're applying some of those e-commerce style techniques to build digital trust in a B2B environment and facilitate the discussions that drive this industry forward. And I appreciate you for that.
If I boiled it down to one thing, I'd say I'm trying to eliminate the pet peeves I've always had. When I want to know, I want to be able to shop cleanly. I want to be able to ask questions. If I decide I want to engage with a firm, I want to do it quickly. I don't want to have to make a dozen calls. I want to connect right to who I want to connect with, and I want to move forward. And those are things that we're trying to solve, is to have somebody who can find a solution, do the research, decide to connect, and connect quickly, cleanly, privately. Those are all things that were kind of mission critical to me personally. And I know I kind of, apply the average man's concept to my, if it bugs me, I know it bugs others. So how do I solve that problem? And that's a large part of what we're doing. So I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to talk about it. I think it's a huge, and those that are ahead of the curve that understand that, this whole concept of how people shop today and make buying decisions and how that may have changed over the last 20 years. I think they're getting ahead of the game. And so this is self-serving to you. I know you guys have done a phenomenal job helping companies really straighten out their digital image. We're trying to create a platform that allows them to place that somewhere and for somebody to find it quickly and easily and in a logical way. And that's really what we're all about. So I'm excited about what we're doing. I appreciate you and what you do and love the opportunity to actually share this with others. Being an old guy, it's fun to be able to come and give a perspective.
Fair. Look, I appreciate the insights and experience, Chris. You always make for an interesting conversation. And for anyone who hasn't seen it, definitely go check out the conversation that I had with Santa back in December. You might recognize some folks there as well. But thank you, everybody. Thank you, Chris, for coming on and sharing your insights with me today. For those of you that are watching, if you have additional questions you'd like to ask Murphy or myself, you can leave those in the comments on LinkedIn and YouTube, or you can leave comments for Chris Runcie too, who I'm sure will be checking those later after he lost power.
His power went out where he was. He's freaking out.
That's what happens when you're in Florida. Sometimes we lose power. That's all I can say. But if you have additional questions or comments, you'd like to leave those in the comments. We'll be responding to those. Or if you have additional topics you'd like to see us discuss, you can leave those in the comments below as well. And hopefully I can get these gentlemen back at least one more time to help me continue to create great content for a great industry. But until next time, Mr. Murphy, thank you so much for your time
Thanks, Adam.
today. I
Great seeing you
appreciate your
again.
insights. And thank you everybody for watching today. We appreciate your time and attention. We'll see y'all again soon. Bye.